Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rob Shmuel, Rabbi Stephen Epstein, with you with this week's 10-minute Torah on the Parashat Tetzevah, and you will be commanded, you will do. But first, let's talk a little bit about what we have coming up. Of course, Thursday evening is going to be Purim. We're going to be reading the Megillah, and we'll be talking a little bit throughout leading up to that about making your own braggers, so that when we discuss the word Haman, when we say Haman's name, you'll be able to make the noise however you want to do it. I'm preparing a costume, and you're encouraged to do the same thing. And we'll have a good time like we usually do. It'll be virtual. We won't be physically together, but we'll be spiritually together in our sacred space. In addition to that, we have some things coming up that I'd like to talk about. One of them, of course, is the Miller course. It's the Introduction to Judaism. It's a great course, an overview of Judaism. It's also accepted by American Jewish University for those who are considering becoming Jewish by choice, and I love that expression, Jewish by choice. And it also is a precursor to going before the Beit Din at the American Jewish University, and then, of course, the mikvah. And if you're a male, there's a ritual circumcision Brit that gets done as well. So we're very excited about that. We're going to be starting that soon. We're going to be sending out an email asking for people who want to get involved in that. There is going to be a cost to it. We're not sure yet. We'll see how many people we have coming. We'll discuss that as we go on. It's not going to be prohibitive. Maybe it'll be $100, $150, somewhere around that. And that's not bad for, excuse me, an 18-course program. So please consider that. The other thing I'd like to do, I'm thinking of doing, is kind of coming off the heels of the Worldwide Wrap. We seem to have a lot of participation, and I was actually surprised at the amount of people who had to fill in and wanted to get involved in the wrap. So I'm thinking, and I know that Temple Shalom of Ontario has done this in the past. One Sunday morning a month, you folks came together and you did a little minyan. And maybe we can do that too. Maybe we'll do that, say, around 9 o'clock on one of the Sundays. We'll go through a real quick weekday service. I know that a lot of you don't have the weekday books, but we can still use either the red or the blue Siddur. They have enough requisite prayers that are done for a regular weekday morning service that we can use some of that. And of course, there's the Shema and a few other things. Maybe do a little Torah reading, whatever. So stay tuned. The final thing I want to say is I just want to let people know I've got questions. There's my yarmulke. And also want to show that I like to be a little fashionable with the same color yarmulke, matching what I'm wearing, etc. All right, so let's talk about Tetzevah. In the previous portion, or Sedra, we talked about, in Teruma, we talked about, everybody's bringing a portion to contribute to the building of the Mishkan. And we talked about the things that go into the Mishkan, the altar, the menorah, and the curtains, the planks, the table, and the columns for the showbread, that type of thing. Now we turn to the dress of the Kohanim. And I'm going to use the Art Scrolls Chumash here because it's got some nice pictures to kind of show you a little bit what some of the things that the high priest would wear, because that was very specific. And Hashem says as well, when they talked about making the inner curtains, about fine linen that would be used for blue, crimson, and purple, blue, red, and purple threads, and also interwoven with gold. The same type of threads were used to make the clothes for the Kohanim, for the high priest. And here's some pictures. And you will see here that they had kind of a bib that they would use. Here's the robe. This is kind of a long coat that they would wear. And make a few other pictures. This was also what the breastplate looked like, and we'll get to that in a couple of seconds because I want to talk a little bit about that. And also another apron that went over it. And here's more of a picture of what the breastplate looked like. That's something that went over the cover of the priest. On the bottom of the priest's robes, you will see uh, little designs that looks like pomegranates interspersed with golden bells, and they were real regular bells. When the priest walked around, he would ring, so that people knew he was coming. Here is the full dress of the high priest. And you can see picture of the high priest wearing all of his clothing, including a mitre, a big kind of a turban, and also a kind of almost like a crown that went around the forehead, and it said Kadosh Hashem, holy to God, on it, and that's what they wore. So the dress of the high priest was meant to reflect their duties. Now, the breastplate was of particular interest. It was folded in half. Inside the middle, inside that fold, was a parchment that had the name of Hashem, the real name of Hashem. And when the priest went into the Holy of Holies, that was the innermost sanctum of the Mishkan, to perform the Yom Kippur service, the Yom Kippur sacrifice, then that was the only time that they spoke the name of God. Now, some people speculate it's the Yud Hey Vav Hey, they actually pronounced it. Other people say we don't know what they said, because Hebrew back then was a little different. Today we look at the Hebrew language and we see the letters, and the letters have sound, with the exception of the Aleph and the Ayin, which are silent letters, which take the sound of whatever vowel or whatever sound is in the word. But ancient Hebrew was a little different. They didn't really, from what I've read, and maybe somebody could correct me if they know differently, but some people feel that the actual alphabet was like a regular alphabet. It had sounds. The Aleph was kind of like an ah sound. The Hey was an eh. The Ayin was kind of an eh sound, kind of a guttural ah. And the Vav could either be an O or an U, as it is today. So it wasn't until Hebrew actually evolved that the consonants became kind of just consonants, and we needed the vowels to be able to distinguish. So, for example, the word king, okay, or to word is melech, and the word reign is melech. The word reigned, the past tense, is malach. Same letters, mem, lamed, and a final chet. Okay, the ma, the la, and the cha. Depending on how that word is vocalized or enunciated, melech or malach, depends on the vowels. Now, typically, people that are native Hebrew speakers know how to pronounce the words based on the context. And actually, ancient Hebrew was a very conceptual, contextual language. So that's why we need the vowels, and that's why, maybe the Yud Hey Vav Hey was pronounced a specific way. I mean, the Yud was kind of an E sound as well, so maybe that's how it was pronounced. And the only time it was pronounced again is during Yom Kippur. So the breastplate, again, had that parchment of God's name inside of it, and it was folded over. On the outside, as you probably saw, were 4 rows of 3 stones each. Each stone was a different stone, different color, different stone, and each stone had engraved on a specific name of one of the tribes. And this was kind of used prophetically. So when the high priest wanted to consult Hashem on a very urgent matter, and only a very urgent, critical matter, then they would consult the ephod, and the stones would light up, and then it was up to the priest to figure out which letters were appropriate in order to discern the answer. And there's a story of Hannah who was, praying, and she asked a question, and the high priest misinterpreted it. It's a long story. So that's what the ephod. Now, one of the words, one of the phrases, an idiom that's used to describe the breastplate is Urim Vitunim, which means perfection and lights, or in other words, perfect lights, because that's what they were. They were perfect lights, perfect in the sense that it was a way that Hashem communicated in his perfection. God is perfect, that's right, with the priest, with the high priest. So that's where that idiom came. So the priest would don their clothes. A lot of times they would wear it just because a lot of times the priests were officiating, they were doing something, right? So the high priest was typically um, in most of those clothes anyway, right? So that was the portion of Tetzavah, and you will command. And of course, there was a sanctification. The priests were anointed with the oil. And one of the things that Dr. Hertz, Rabbi Hertz, says in the Sansino Chumash is that the oil was used because they're out in the desert, and the art scroll is a little bit more fundamental. They say no, it was a very spiritual thing, and that was it. All right, so we will see you Thursday night, 7 p.m. Pacific time, for our reading of the Megillah. I will have my share of Slivovitz, and they say that you're supposed to get so drunk you can't tell if they're saying Haman or Mordechai. So we'll see how that goes. But it's interesting because you're supposed to read the Megillah in the evening, then you're supposed to read it again in the morning. And by the way, just kind of as a trivia, what does Megillah mean? It means scroll. So Megillah of Esther, scroll of Esther. Okay, so thank you for tuning in, and we will see you Thursday night.